قد أفلح المؤمنون.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Respected Muslim brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we'll be covering the biography of one of Rasulullah's greatest companions. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We'll be covering the biography of Sayyidina Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman al-Absi al-Ansari, radwanullahi ta'ala alayh, وهو حافظ سر رسول الله. He was the keeper of Rasulullah's secret. And as we know, when we do these biographies, we usually give an introduction to highlight why we are covering the biography and why it is important. So, Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman, radwanullahi ta'ala alayh, is without a doubt one of Rasulullah's greatest companions, as previously stated. When we look at his life, we see the biography of a man who was who had fully embraced the message of Islam. Correct? We see a man who had a profound level of wisdom and knowledge. We see a man who Rasulullah placed, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, placed a great level of trust in. And we know from the reports that we're going to go over that Rasulullah indeed loved him and revered him and respected him, and that he had a level of hayba, an aura of power among the tabi'een, the second generations of Muslims. They used to look up to him, and they used to respect him, and they used to revere him for his knowledge and for his piety and for his zuhd, his detachment from the dunya. And so Hudhayfah is not only a pride and a joy and a reason for every Muslim to raise their head pride, but particularly the people of Iraq, and especially the Shia of Amir al-Muminoon salamullah alayh, because Hudhayfah is one of the Salaf when it comes to the Shia of Amir al-Muminoon. He was one of the first of his Shia, and he came from that first generation of Shia. And so Hudhayfah radwanullah ta'ala alayh, unfortunately his biography has been neglected. And this is simply because many people, as we know, do not study the field of history, or when they do, they mainly stick to what is narrated on the pulpits. And so Hudhayfah's biography has been very much neglected by many of our speakers. However, today, inshallah, when we cover his life, we're going to cover his biography, and we're going to see that there are many profound lessons that can be learned from Sayyiduna Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman. Because Hudhayfah, he was the keeper of Rasulullah's secrets. And there are certain pieces of knowledge that Rasulullah only trusted him with, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so as we examine his biography, I want you to look out for the things that Hudhayfah says about future events, as well as the things that Hudhayfah says regarding the fitna that was going on between the various factions within the early Islamic world, as well as the polemics. Because when it comes to polemics, when it comes to proving that the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt are on the haqq, Hudhayfah's bio is filled with reports and narrations that leave us with no doubt whatsoever that the Shia of Ali are on the haqq, and the Shia of Uthman and the other factions are all on the batil. But with that being said, let us begin breaking down the biography of this blessed man. So Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman, some of the quick forerunners to his biography. We mentioned that he was the keeper of Rasulullah's secret, and he was one of the conquerors of Iran, and he was the governor of al-Madain, and he was a companion of both Rasulullah and Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayh. He was born in Mecca, and I've been unable to locate a source that mentions when he was born, but we know that he was born in Mecca and he died in al-Madain in the year 36 after the Hijrah. And this has been reported by Khalifa ibn Khayyat in his Tarikh. In Tarikh Khalifa ibn Khayyat, he mentions that he is one of the people that passed away in the year 36 after Hijrah. Furthermore, Shaykhun al-Tusi rahmatullahi alayh, in his Kitab al-Rijal, Rijal al-Tusi, he mentions the following. He mentions in the chapter regarding those who narrated from the Prophet, he mentions Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman, and he mentions that Hudhayfah passed away in the city of Madain after the bay'ah of Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayh by 40 days. So he did live long enough to see Amir al-Mu'mineen become Khalifa, to the position of Khilafah, as the Mukhalifin call it, rulership over the Islamic world, over the Islamic empire, the Islamic state. However, he died not too long after that. He died after 40 days. Furthermore, Shaykhuna al-Tusi also includes him in the chapter of those who are companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullahi alayh. So he's in the chapter on Rasulullah's companions and the chapter of Amir al-Mu'mineen's companions. We see in Kitab Rijal al-Tusi on page 60, he reports, and this is bio number 511, he says, Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman al-Absi, وعداده في الأنصار. So Hudhayfah was counted among one of the Ansar, وقد عد من الأركان الأربعة, and he was counted among the arkan. So a rukn in the Arabic language, a rukn, it means a pillar. The fact that Hudhayfah is being referred to here as one of the arkan al-arba'a, one of the four pillars of Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayhi, shows his loyalty to the Imam. Furthermore, Shaykhun al-Kashi rahmatullahi alayhi, as we see in his book Ikhtiyar Ma'rifat al-Rijal, he reports the following. He reports with his isnad to Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayhi, and we already covered this in the event on Sayyidah Zahra. He says that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam once said, this can be found in Ikhtiyar Ma'rifat al-Rijal, volume 1, page 112, hadith number 13. He says, the earth was sustained by 7 individuals through whom sustenance is provided, through whom victory is achieved, and through whom rain is granted. Among them are Salman al-Farisi, al-Miqdad, Abu Dharr, Ammar, and Hudhayfah, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'een. And Amir al-Mu'mineen used to say, I am their Imam, and they are the ones who prayed over Fatima al-Zahra. Salamullahi alayha. So this shows you the high status of Hudhayfah and the level of confidence and trust that Amir al-Mu'mineen had in him, is that he was one of the people who prayed over Sayyidah Zahra. Salamullahi alayha. And Amir al-Mu'mineen used to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he used to provide rizq to the people of this world, and this is a big issue of not fiqh, but rather aqa'id, as well as an issue of wisdom, is that when someone asks us, the earth is filled with kuffar and munafiqeen, why does Allah, continue to provide rizq? Why doesn't he destroy these people the same way he destroyed the civilizations of the past? We say that is because among them are mu'mineen, and it is because of these mu'mineen that Allah sends down his rizq. If it weren't for these mu'mineen, none of those other people would receive rizq at all. And so these people, the first generation from as-Salaf al-Salih, and we would say the best of them, after the 4 who are mentioned here, Salman al-Farisi, al-Miqdad, Abi Dharr, and Ammar and Hudhayfah, correct? And so these are the that first generation. And Amir al-Mu'mineen says that I am their Imam. Amir al-Mu'mineen is affirming that they were on the wilayah. Al-Kashi further reports, and this next report, it does not have an isnad. Shaykh al-Kashi was just mentioning this as though it was something that was well known. So or it was perhaps something that he read in one of the older books. Allahu a'lam. So in Kitab Ikhtiyar Ma'rifat al-Rijal, in volume 1, page 182, and this is report number 78, he says that Al-Fadl ibn Shaban, rahimahullah, was asked about Ibn Mas'ud. And Fadl ibn Shaban was an early Shi'i historian as well as a biographer. And so he was asked about Ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman. So he replied, Hudhayfah was not like Ibn Mas'ud, because Hudhayfah was one of the arkan, while Ibn Mas'ud supported the people, i.e. the opposition. He inclined towards them, and he supported them. And I want to point out something very interesting here, is that the footnote for the line لأن حذيفة رضوان الله تعالى عليه كان ركنا, in the footnote, and this is something that those of you who may have worked with Rijal al-Kashi, or the history of the book, it is filled with these sorts of issues where there are different wordings in the manuscripts and certain typos. So he says in some copies, in some manuscript, it says Zakiyan. So if you look at the words Zakiyan and Ruknan, you see they're the same letters, but with different, the dots are in different places. So it could be either or perhaps it could be both. Allahu A'lam, is that he was referred to as a Rukn or a Zaki. And I think the stronger view is Rukn, because that was confirmed by Shaykhun al-Tusi, rahmatullahi alayhi, in his Rijal. طيب. Continuing on, the lineage of Sayyidina Hudhayfah, it is reported by Ibn Sa'd as well as Ibn Abd al-Barr in Tabaqat Ibn Sa'd and Kitab al-Isti'ab respectively. Both of these historians mention his bio as follows. They say he is Hudhayfah. They record his lineage as follows. وهو حذيفة بن اليمان وهو ابن حسيل ابن جابر بن ربيعة بن عمرو بن جروة وهو اليمان بن الحارث بن قطيعة بن عبس. حذيفة, as for Hudhayfah's mother, her name was Al-Rabab bint Ka'b ibn Adi ibn Ka'b ibn Abd al-Ashhal. Correct? So, regarding Hudhayfah's lineage, there is a very interesting issue that comes up. There's an issue that comes up, and that is the issue of his title, Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman. Why was his father known as al-Yaman? So Hudhayfah's father, his name was Husayl, correct? However, his ancestor was called al-Yaman. As you know, some people, if you have an ancestor who's very famous, a grandfather who's very famous, sometimes will call you Ibn, and they won't call you the son of your father, but they'll refer back to your ancestor. So Hudhayfah's ancestor was known as al-Yaman, and I'll copy this from, we'll quote this from Tarikh al-Tabari, which is in English. He says Hudhayfah was known by his great-grandfather, by the name of his great-grandfather. This is in volume 39, at the very end of Tarikh al-Tabari, which is the biographies of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. He mentions his lineage, but he says that his ancestor, Jurwa ibn al-Harith, is the one who is called al-Yaman. And he was thus called because he had murdered someone of his own tribe. So he fled to Medina and became an ally of the Banu Abd al-Ashhal. His family was then called al-Yaman, the Southerners, because they were allied to a Yemeni clan. Correct? I believe earlier I mentioned in the introduction that he was born in Mecca. This was a mistake on my part. He was actually born in Medina. So the reports further tell us regarding his mother, and we'll talk about his father in a bit, because his father was also a great man, Sahabiyun Jalil min Shuhada'i Uhud. He was one of the martyrs of Uhud. But I want to mention a report regarding Hudhayfah's mother. There is a report, a very important report, that talks about the mother of Sayyiduna Hudhayfah, and it was recorded in Jami' at-Tirmidhi, Hadith 3781, as well as Kitab al-Mustadrak ala Sahihain, in volume 3, page 429, hadith 5630. This is a very beautiful hadith. So the report says, and this is reported with a chain to Hudhayfah himself. She said to him, my mother, he reports, my mother asked me, when is your planned time with the Prophet? So Hudhayfah replied, I have not had a planned time to see him since such and such time. She rebuked me. So I said to her, let me go to the Prophet so that I may perform Maghrib with him and ask him to seek forgiveness for you and I. So Hudhayfah's mother, she asked Hudhayfah, she says, when's the last time you spoke to Rasulullah? So he said to her, it's been a while. So she rebuked him. She was upset with him. She said, Hudhayfah, what is this? Go talk to the Prophet. What are you doing? What do you mean you haven't seen him in such a long time? So Hudhayfah said to his mother, he says, I'll go pray with him, and then I will ask him to pray for us, to ask for forgiveness for you and me. So Hudhayfah continues, so I came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam so that I may perform Maghrib with him. And so he prayed Maghrib, and then he prayed Isha. So then he turned, and I followed him, and he heard my voice and said, who is this? Is this Hudhayfah? So Hudhayfah basically says, I followed the Prophet out of the mosque, and he sensed my presence. So I said, yes, Ya Rasulullah, I'm Hudhayfah. So Rasulullah said to him, what is your need? May Allah forgive you and your mother. And so the report indicates that Rasulullah knew exactly what Hudhayfah wanted to ask. So he then said to Hudhayfah, indeed, this is an angel that has descended to the earth, that has never descended to the earth before tonight. He sought permission from his Lord to greet me with peace and to give me the glad tidings that Fatima, Sayyidat Nisa'i Ahl al-Jannah, and that Al-Hasan al-Hussein are Sayyida Shababi Ahl al-Jannah. So this hadith is beautiful because not only do you get some information about Hudhayfah and his mother, but you also get the manqaba of Sayyidah Zahra and the manqaba of Al-Hasan al-Hussein, salamullahi alayhim. And so it seems as though Hudhayfah is narrating to us his high status with Rasulullah, is that Rasulullah is not only praying for him, but Rasulullah is narrating to him. He says, an angel just came and gave me this glad tidings. And so you are one of the first people that I will narrate this to. Correct? As for the kunya of Sayyiduna Hudhayfah, Ibn Sa'd as well as al-Tabarani, and we already mentioned the source for Ibn Sa'd on that same page from before, but Tabarani mentions it in Al-Mu'jam al-Kabir, volume 3, page 178, Hadith number 2998. They report that Hudhayfah's kunya was Aba Abdullah. So his students would address him as Ya Aba Abdullah. Ibn Sa'd further reports on the authority of Muhammad ibn Ishaq, in his book, as Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, in al-Tabaqat al-Kubra, in volume 4, page 250, he reports that according to Muhammad ibn Ishaq, as well as his own teacher al-Waqidi, i.e. the teacher of Muhammad ibn Sa'd, that Rasulullah made a pact of brotherhood between Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman and Ammar ibn Yasir. And this is very, very important. I cannot stress how important this is, that the pact of brotherhood was between Hudhayfah and Ammar, because when you look at the relationship between Hudhayfah and Ammar, you're going to see that these two had a very special friendship, that they both loved and revered one another very greatly, and that Hudhayfah said some very important things about Ammar, and that Ammar, radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, there are certain things that Hudhayfah said that Ammar was the only one who could understand and interpret, explain them and interpret them. So this is very, very important, the fact that these two were paired together. And it is no surprise, as we know, Ammar ibn Yasir, inshallah, will cover his biography as well, and you will see just how great of a man he was. But these two great men, it is very beautiful to see that that Rasulullah paired them together. So now we shall go over some of the reports regarding the early life of Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman. And this is the following report regarding whether or not he was a Muhajir or an Ansari. This is reported by al-Tabarani, al-Bazzar, and Ibn Abd al-Barr, all on the authority of Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, with their isanid to Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib. And for brevity's sake, we will simply quote Musnad al-Bazzar. This is found in volume 7, page 337, hadith 2936. They report that Hudhayfah said, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam gave me the choice between Hijrah and Nusra. So I chose Nusra. So what this means is, Hijrah, if you accept Hijrah, then you are counted as a Muhajir. If you accept Nusra, you are counted as an Ansari. So this is a very special manqaba for Hudhayfah, that Rasulullah let him choose. It's like, if you want to be counted as a Muhajir, you can be counted as a Muhajir. If you want to be counted as an Ansari, you can be counted as an Ansari. And so Hudhayfah chose to be counted as an Ansari. And the report of al-Bazzar as well as al-Tabarani were certified by al-Haythami in Kitab Majma' al-Zawaid. So he affirmed that these reports are acceptable. Correct? So he says that one of the narrators is Hasan al-Hadith, so that means the hadith is Hasan, according to the standards of the Mukhalifin. Now, let's talk about Hudhayfah's father. Let's talk about the story of Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman's father. And so we mentioned this in the biography of Sayyidina Jabir ibn Abdullah, is that there is a class of the companions of Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the forgotten companions. Correct? These companions of Rasulullah, they laid down their lives, and Allah blessed them with shahada during the battle of Uhud. And as we mentioned, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he lost Hamza on that day. And Jabir lost his father, Abdullah ibn Haram. Correct? And now we see that Hudhayfah as well is one of those people who lost his father in the battle of Uhud. And the story of how Hudhayfah lost his father at Uhud is a very, very sad story, but there is much wisdom and much power in it. And this story indicates the greatness of his character, and it gives you a sort of, a taste of things to come when it comes to who this man was. Correct? So Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj reported, and I'm going to narrate a report, and I want to let the audience, those of you listening, I want to let you guess who narrates this report. Go ahead, take a wild guess who narrates this report. Take a wild guess who's about to narrate this next report for us. Let you guys pause the video and take a guess. If you guessed Abu Tufail, congratulations, you've been following Mu'minoon long enough to know that we can't do an event without narrating something from Abu Tufail, radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi. So Abu Tufail reports, because as we know, Abu Tufail was a disciple of Hudhayfah. He graduated from the school of Hudhayfah, salamullahi alayhi, before he became a companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And this shows you the greatness of Abu Tufail, is that he studied not only under Amir al-Mu'mineen, he not only benefited from Amir al-Mu'mineen's knowledge, as well as the knowledge of the other great companions of Rasulullah. So he reports in Sahih Muslim Hadith 1787 with his chain to Abu Tufail that Hudhayfah once said, "Nothing prevented me from being present at the Battle of Badr except this incident. I came with my father Husayl to participate in the battle, but we were caught by the disbelievers of Quraysh. So they asked us, do you intend to go to Muhammad? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So we replied, we do not intend to go with him, but we wish to go back to Medina. So they took from us a covenant in the name of Allah that we would return back to Medina and we would not fight on the side of Muhammad. So we came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and related the incident to him. And he said to us, both of you proceed to Medina, fulfill the covenant you made with them, and seek Allah's help against them. Correct? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is a report that I think some of the fuqaha have given fatwa on. They say that even an oath that you take with a non-Muslim is binding. This is an issue that the fuqaha have discussed. I don't want to dive too much into it because we are not fuqaha. We stay in our own lane. We'll let them deal with that. Correct? So Hudhayfah is essentially telling us is that me and my father, we wanted to participate in Badr. However, because of this incident, we did not participate in Badr. And the fact that they did not participate in Badr would later cause an issue for them. And so we refer back to the seerah of Ibn Ishaq for this next report regarding Hudhayfah's actions in Ma'rakat Uhud. He reports the following. He says, and this is on the authority of Mahmud ibn Labid, he says, when Rasulullah went to Uhud, Husayl ibn Jabir, who was al-Yaman, the father of Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman, and Thabit ibn Waqsh were sent up into the forts with the women and children. They were both old men. So similar to the father of Jabir. Remember, Jabir's father was a very old man. He was in his 90s, but he still wanted to fight alongside the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so Hudhayfah's father was also an old man. So he was sent back into one of the forts during the Battle of Uhud with this man Thabit ibn Waqsh. So they were both old men, and they said to one another, "What are you waiting for? Confound you! Neither of us will live for much longer. We are certain to die today or tomorrow. So let us take our swords and join the apostle. Perhaps Allah will grant us martyrdom with him." So these two oldsters, these two shuyukh, they basically said, you know what? What are we doing? Let's go fight alongside the Prophet. We're old men. We're not going to live for much longer. What a blessing it would be to attain martyrdom in the ranks of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they took their swords and they sallied out until they mingled with the army. No one knew anything about them. So Thabit was killed by the mushrikeen, and Husayl was killed by the swords of the Muslims who killed him without recognizing him. So essentially what happened here is that in the chaos of the rout, Hudhayfah's father was attacked by the Muslims who mistook him for one of the Muslimin. And that is because he had not fought alongside them at Badr. They did not recognize him. And so Hudhayfah, radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, he saw this happen. He cried out, "It is my father." They said, "By Allah, we did not know him," and they spoke the truth. And so Hudhayfah said, "May Allah forgive you, for he is most compassionate." So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wanted to pay his blood money. He wanted to pay the diya to Hudhayfah for the loss of his father. But Hudhayfah, radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, what did he do? He took it, وَتَصَدَّقْ بِهَا, and he gave it as alms to the Muslims, and that increased his favor with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so this is an outstanding manqaba of Sayyidina Hudhayfah. As in, imagine if someone had accidentally killed your father, correct? Most people would not forgive the people responsible in this situation. Correct, and this happens. We have rules for this in the Sharia, that when a Muslim is accidentally killed, correct? So in this situation, what would you have done? Many of us would have been furious. Many of us would have been traumatized. Many of us, wal-'iyadhu billah, we would have wanted revenge. But Hudhayfah, radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, he looked at the situation without any emotion. He was not emotional about it. And he said, "No, these are my Muslim brothers, and this was an accident. This was not. I'm not going to cause fitna between the Muslims, especially after what we just went through, what we suffered at Uhud." Correct? And so Rasulullah even gave him the diya. He even gave him the blood money for this. And Hudhayfah, radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, because of his greatness, because of his respect for Rasulullah, because of his wisdom, he declined to accept the money. He said, "Ya Rasulullah, I will take this and I'll give it as sadaqah to the Muslims." Correct? And that earned him favor with Rasulullah. That made Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam very pleased with him. A similar report can be found in Kitab Sahih al-Bukhari, Hadith 3290, which is narrated on the authority of Aisha. And so Aisha adds that when they killed his father, she reports that that Hudhayfah, what he said to these men, that he said to them, "May Allah forgive you." And Urwa, her nephew, adds that Hudhayfah continued to ask Allah to forgive his father's killers until he met Allah, i.e., until he passed away. And so Hudhayfah not only forgave his Muslim brothers for what they did to his father, for the accidental death of his father, but he spent the rest of his life praying for them, as asking Allah to forgive them. And this is what we would call some of the lost akhlaq of Islam. This example set by Hudhayfah, there are not many Muslims today follow his example. It's one thing to forgive someone who wronged you, but to spend the rest of your life asking Allah to forgive them is truly something great, and is truly one of the great merits of Sayyidina Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman. And so, as we said, this earned him favor with Rasulullah, who said Rasulullah took him under his wing. And so now we're going to go over one of Hudhayfah's more humorous merits. And this is another story that Hudhayfah himself narrates for us. And this can be found in Kitab Sahih Muslim. It's a very humorous story. So in Sahih Muslim, we read on the authority, with his chain to Ibrahim at-Taymi, on the authority of his father, who said, "We were sitting in the company of Hudhayfah, and a man said, 'If I were in the time of Rasulullah, I would have fought by his side, and I would have striven hard for his cause.' So Hudhayfah said, 'You might have done that, but you should not make a flourish of your enthusiasm. I was with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam on the night of Ma'rakatul Ahzab, which is Ma'rakatul Khandaq, and we were gripped by a violent wind and severe cold. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "Hark, the man who brings me news of the enemy shall be ranked with me on Yawm al-Qiyamah." So we all kept quiet, and none of us responded to him. And again he said, "Hark, a man who brings me the news of the enemy shall be ranked with me on Yawm al-Qiyamah." So we kept quiet, and none of us responded to him. He again said, "Hark, a man who brings me news of the enemy and shall be ranked with me on Yawm al-Qiyamah." Then he said, "Get up, Hudhayfah, bring me news of the enemy." So Hudhayfah says, when he called me by name, I had no alternative but to get up. So at first he was asking for volunteers, but now Rasulullah was ordering me. So I heeded his call. So the report says, Rasulullah said to him, "Go and bring me information about the enemy, and do nothing that may provoke them against me." So Rasulullah is telling him, "Hudhayfah, go spy on Abu Sufyan and his army, and bring me information. Do not cause an issue, just go and spy and bring me back news." So Hudhayfah says, "When I left him, I felt warm as if I were walking in a heated hammam until I reached them." And a hammam is a bathhouse, and today we might call it a sauna. And so during Ma'rakatul Khandaq, some of you may be familiar with the seerah of the Prophet, towards the end of the battle, after the Muslims, successfully fought off any attempts to cross the Khandaq, and of course the well-known hero of this battle was Ali sallallahu alayhi. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did is that he broke the morale of the mushrikeen by seizing them with powerful winds and severe cold. And so Hudhayfah is essentially telling us, he says, when Rasulullah came and he was asking for someone to volunteer to cross the Khandaq and go spy on them, I was sitting there really, really cold. We were shivering. But when Rasulullah told me to go, I felt as though I was walking in a heated bath. And this is one of the miracles of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he says, "I saw Abu Sufyan warming his back against fire, and I put an arrow in the middle of the bow, intending to shoot at him. But then I recalled the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 'Do not provoke them against me.' Had I shot at him, I would have hit him. But I returned and felt warm as if I were walking in a heated bath. Presenting myself before him, I gave him information about the enemy. When I had done so, I began to feel cold. So Rasulullah wrapped me in a blanket that he had in excess to his own requirement, and which he used to cover himself with while saying his prayer. So I continued to sleep until it was morning, and when it was morning, he said, 'Get up, O heavy sleeper.'" This report is essentially saying that Hudhayfah, radhiyallahu ta'ala alayhi, he says, when I got back to the Prophet, the miracle through which he had heeded me, it expired. And so I gave Rasulullah my report. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he noticed that I was cold, so he gave me one of his blankets. And I slept essentially in Rasulullah's tent. So when it was time for Salat, Rasulullah is saying to Hudhayfah, and this is almost as though he's poking fun at him or he's being kind to him. He says, "Get up, O heavy sleeper." It's like, enough sleep, Hudhayfah. It's time for Salat. Correct? And so we would say here that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he appointed Hudhayfah to be his spy. Because he was Rasulullah's spy during Ma'rakatul Ahzab. Correct? Or Ma'rakatul Khandaq. Now Ibn Sa'd and al-Bukhari report a report that highlights perhaps one of Hudhayfah's most well-known fada'il. And this report can be found, I'm going to quote this from, as I said, it's in Tabaqat ibn Sa'd, but we're going to quote it from Sahih al-Bukhari, just for the sake of those who want to read it in English. Sahih al-Bukhari, hadith 3743. The report says, Alqam ibn Qais went to Bilad al-Sham and he met Abu Darda. So Abu Darda asked him, "Where are you from?" So Alqam replied, "I am from the people of Kufa." So Abu Darda said to him, "Isn't there among you the keeper of the secret which nobody else knows?" Meaning Hudhayfah. As in, this report highlights that Abu Darda, who's another Sahabi in Ash-Sham, like Hudhayfah was in Iraq, Abu Darda was in Ash-Sham. This shows that many of the companions of Rasulullah, they knew that Hudhayfah had this secret knowledge. The names of the hypocrites who tried to assassinate Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So now we're going to read over this report. And this report is very infamous. And I think it needs more attention because it highlights that this nonsense of adalatul sahaba, or that all the sahaba are udul, is something that only foolish people follow. Correct? Ahmad ibn Hanbal as well as al-Bazzar report. And the reason why we're quoting both of them is very important because this report comes from Abu Tufayl. Because remember, if we're going to do an event in Mu'minoon, there has to be some mention of Abu Tufayl. So in Musnad Ahmad, the chain goes back to Abu Tufayl. Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal, volume 39, page 210 to 211, hadith 23,782. Correct? The report stops at Abu Tufayl here. However, in Musnad al-Bazzar reports that Abu Tufayl got it from Hudhayfah himself. So Hudhayfah himself narrates, he says, when Rasulullah set out to go to the Battle of Tabuk, he stopped at Al-Aqaba and then commanded his caller to call out that no one should take the path leading to Aqaba, since the Prophet was traveling through that path. And the Prophet had Ammar ibn Yasir radhiyallahu ta'ala alayh, and as we remember, these two were paired together. So Ammar was pulling the Prophet's camel, and Hudhayfah was pushing it from the back, radhiyallahu ta'ala alayh. So a group covering their faces came upon the caravan and they attacked Rasulullah. So Ammar responded and he attacked the masked men, and Rasulullah called to Hudhayfah, "Quickly pull forward." Then the Prophet came off the camel and asked Ammar whether he had identified those people. So Ammar said, "No, they were masked." The Prophet ﷺ asked Ammar, "Do you know what they wanted?" So Ammar said, "Allah and His Messenger know best." So Rasulullah said they wanted to throw the Prophet from the Aqaba. The report continues after that when Ammar had a dispute with one of these men, and we'll go over who this man is, we'll uncover who he is in a bit. Ammar said to him, "I swear to you by Allah, how many people of the Aqaba tried to attack the Prophet?" So the man said, "We think they were about 14. Ammar replied, "And if you were amongst them, it would be 15. And Ammar bore witness that there were 12 parties belonging to Allah and His Messenger who are ready to fight in this world and on the day when the witnesses would be resurrected." So this report is authenticated by al-Haythami in Kitab Majma' al-Zawaid. This report was certified in Majma' al-Zawaid. However, there's something very interesting here. The report, according to al-Haythami, is in, he mentions this in Majma' al-Zawaid, volume 1, page 145, hadith number 425. He says it was narrated by al-Tabarani and that its chain is good. However, we can't find it in al-Tabarani. For some reason, the report is missing from al-Tabarani. It is only in Musnad Ahmad and Musnad al-Bazzar. I don't know what to say. This is not the first time we've seen this happen. And those of you who have been with us long enough, you know exactly why the report is missing. Ibn Sa'd and al-Hakim both report, and this is very, very important, this next report, because it comes from Amir al-Muminoon, salam alayhi. This is found in Tabaqat ibn Sa'd, as well as al-Mustadrak al-Sahihain. And we're going to quote the version from al-Mustadrak in volume 3, page 429, hadith 5631. They report that Ali, salamullahi alayh, was asked about Hudhayfah. So he said the following. He was asked about a few of the companions of Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wa, but we're going to focus here on Hudhayfah. He says, كَانَ أَعْلَمُ النَّاسِ بِالْمُنَافِقِينَ. No one knew the hypocrites. He knew who the hypocrites were better than anyone. Correct? This report is very important because it highlights that Imam Ali salamullahi alayhi, he also knew of this fadila of Sayyidina Hudhayfah. It's something that set him apart from the other companions of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa. So this is a reference to the incident of Al-Aqaba. Now, continuing on, let's see if we can identify some of these people. Who are the people that tried to assassinate the Prophet? Now, I'm not saying that it was Abu Bakr and Umar, but I am saying it was Abu Bakr and Umar. And if you want more info on this, watch our series on the biography of Abu Bakr. Correct? But now I want to show you something very, very interesting. And this is one of the most dangerous reports regarding the issue of the Sahaba trying to assassinate the Prophet. Pay very close attention here. We read in Kitab Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah, volume 21, page 186 to 187, hadith 39,886. This is a report that should have been destroyed. If al-Dhahabi had seen Ibn Abi Shaybah, had narrated this report, he probably would have takfired him. Correct? Because this one report is more than enough to destroy the madhab of the Mukhalifin in one fell swoop. Ibn Abi Shaybah reports the following. He reports, and take a wild guess who's narrating this. Take a wild guess. It's Abu Tufayl. Once again. قال رافضي. He's a Rafidi. Alhamdulillah, we follow in the footsteps of the Salaf al-Salih. I just wonder why these people claim to follow the Sahaba, but none of them follow Abu Tufayl. May Allah guide them. It says, كان بين حذيفة وبين رجل منهم من أهل العقبة بعض ما يكون بين الناس فقال أنشدك بالله كم كان أصحاب العقبة فقال القوم فاخبره فقد سألك فقال أبو موسى الأشعري. The report here, what is it saying in English? Hudhayfah was arguing with a man, one of the people who was at Aqaba, one of these would-be assassins of the Prophet. So Hudhayfah said to him, how many of them were you? How many of there were you? So the people said to this man, tell him, answer his question. So Abu Musa al-Ash'ari said, قد كنا نخبر أنهم 14. فقال حذيفة وإن كنت فيهم, and if you were among them, فقد كانوا 15. أشهد بالله أن 12 منهم حربا لله ورسوله في الحياة الدنيا ويوم يقوم الأشهاد وعذر 3 قالوا ما سمعنا منادي رسول الله ولا علمنا ما يريد القوم. Now, something very interesting here. This same report is in Sahih Muslim in Hadith 2779c. However, very interestingly, Muslim's wording of the report not only does not have Abu Musa al-Ash'ari's name in it, but because of his censorship of the hadith, you know what it means? He changed the meaning of the hadith. So it says, كان بين رجل من أهل العقبة وبين حذيفة بعض ما يكون بين الناس فقال أنشدك بالله كم كان أصحاب العقبة قال فقال له القوم أخبره إذا سألك قال كنا نخبر أنهم 14 فإن كنت منهم فقد كان القوم 15 وأشهد بالله أن 12 منهم حربا لله ولرسوله في الحياة الدنيا ويوم يقوم الأشهاد. Where's the mention of, what's it called? Where's the mention of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari? Why did you remove that the man that he was referring to was Abu Musa al-Ash'ari? Now the reason why is because Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, if you know who this man is, the Mukhalifin take a lot of hadith and a lot of fiqh from this man. And Umar trusted him. And the Mukhalifin love him because of what he did to Amir al-Muminoon during the arbitration. Correct? But Hudhayfah is telling you this man is one of the people who tried to kill Rasulullah. What is this Adalat al-Sahaba bid'ah that you've come up with? Where you've authenticated a man who tried to murder your own prophet. Correct? Now, let us move on. The report says, he also adds something regarding an incident where the prophet comes across some water. You can read that in the report. on Sahih Muslim. However, there is one more thing I wish to add regarding Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. This is very, very interesting. Al-Fasawi reported in Kitab al-Ma'rifa wa Tarikh in volume 3, page 89. You should pay close attention to this report. This report, the isnad of this report is sahih, according to the Mukhalifin. The report says, حدثني ابن نمير حدثنا أبي عن الأعمش عن شفيق قال كنا مع حذيفة جلوسا. We were sitting with Hudhayfah. فدخل عبد الله وأبو موسى المسجد. Abdullah, whenever you see the narrators of Kufa, whenever you see the tabi'een of Kufa, just say Abdullah. You're like, which Abdullah? Abdullah ibn Man. Whenever they just mention Abdullah, they are referring to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Correct? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the Sahabi. Wa Abu Musa is Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. They entered the mosque. So Hudhayfah said, أحدهما منافق. One of them is a hypocrite. Then he said, إن أشبه الناس هديا ودلا وسمتا برسول الله عبد الله. He says, and Abdullah is more, the English translation is, he says, the person whose guidance, demeanor, and conduct most resemble those of the Prophet is Abdullah. So let's make this very easy for the Mukhalifin. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari and Abdullah enter the room, enter the mosque. Hudhayfah says one of them is a munafiq, one of them is a hypocrite. Okay? Then he says the one most similar to the Prophet in his demeanor and his guidance is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. So now, who's the hypocrite? There's two options here. It's Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. Hudhayfah gave you a hint. He says that Abdullah is more similar to the Prophet in his guidance and in his demeanor. So who is the hypocrite? Play the Jeopardy theme, correct? And we'll give them some time to figure it out. But in case that's not clear enough, this is not clear enough, let me show you another report that leaves very, very little doubt. Ibn Abdul Barr al-Andalusi reports, and this is found in Kitab al-Isti'ab in page 442 to 443 in the biography of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. He says the following. He says, for until he acted as Hudhayfah mentioned, it is reported that Hudhayfah had said some words about him which I prefer not to mention. In Arabic, it says the following. فقد روي فيه لحذيفة كلام كرهت ذكره والله يغفر له. Hudhayfah said something about Abu Musa al-Ash'ari that I really don't want to say. Ibn Abdul Barr, what is this? Usually you're good with this stuff. Usually you're really good at exposing the crimes of the Sahaba. How come this time you decided to take a page out of a Dhahabi's book? How come this time you decided to play the censorship game? But in any case, we have what this is. We know what he was referring to. In Kitab Sharh Nahj al-Balagha by Ibn Abi al-Hadid, Ibn Abi al-Hadid reports the following. He quotes al-Isti'ab by Ibn Abdul Barr, but then he tells you what it was that he censored. Correct? So he says that Ibn Abdul Barr said, فَقَدْ رُوِيَ لِحُذَيْفَ فِيهِ كَلَامًا كَرِهْتُ ذِكْرُهُ وَاللَّهُ يَغْفِرْ لَهُ. Then Ibn Abi al-Hadid comments, قُلْتُ الكلام الذي أشار إليه أبو عمر بن عبد البر ولم يذكره قول فيه وقد ذكر عنده في الدين فأما أنتم فتقولون ذلك وأما أنا فأشهد أنه عدو لله ولرسوله وحرب لهما في الحياة الدنيا ويوم يقوم الأشهاد يوم لا ينفع الظالمين معذرتهم ولهم اللعنة ولهم سوء الدار. وكان حذيفة عارفا بالمنافقين أسر إليه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أمرهم وأعلمه أسماءهم. In English, what is Hudhayfah saying? It says, once Hudhayfah was in a meeting and some people mentioned how religious Abu Musa al-Ash'ari was. He's such a religious man. Rajul Dayan, Mutadayin. So Hudhayfah replied by saying, as for you, you say that. You believe he's a religious man. But I bear witness that he is an enemy of Allah and his messenger. And that they are at war against them in this life until the day of judgment, when the wrongdoers' excuses will not benefit them. And they will have the curse, they will be cursed, and they will have the worst abode. And then he comments, Hudhayfah was knowledgeable about the hypocrites, which we've already explained why, and the Prophet had secretly informed him of their matters and their names. Furthermore, Ibn Abi al-Hadid states, he says the following as well, on the same page. وروي أن عمارا سأل عن أبي موسى. فقال لقد سمعت فيه من حذيفة قولا عظيما سمعته يقول صاحب البرنس الأسود ثم كلح كلوحا علمت منه أنه كان ليلة العقبة بين ذلك الرهط. In English, Ammar was once asked about Abu Musa. So he said, I have heard Hudhayfah say something significant about him. I heard Hudhayfah say, the man with the black hood. And then Hudhayfah frowned in such a way that made me, i.e. Ammar, realize that Abu Musa was among those involved in the incident of Al-Aqaba that night. So Ammar, as we said, him and Hudhayfah were very close. They were friends. They had an old companionship. And inshallah, in the next part, we will see that they fought in the conquest of Persia together. Correct? So he says that Hudhayfah told me, he said something to me that made me understand that this man, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, is one of the munafiqeen. Correct? With that being said, we will bring this part of Hudhayfah's biography to a close, and inshallah we will continue in the next part. We'll ask you to keep us in your dua, and we will end with Surah Al-Fatiha. تسبقها الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على